Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. This is a really unique experience. I've done Zoom for a really long time, so I happen to like it, but now I see a lot of people have joined the bandwagon. The negatives of doing Zoom is that I don't get to see your pretty faces in person and to really enjoy a relationship with you, which I've missed. I see Jackie's on, and I see Natalie all the way from, where are you now? You're in like Baltimore somewhere.
Yeah, I'm in Maryland.
And Lizzie's joining. She's probably really relieved because she doesn't have to deal with tax season right now. Smile if it's true. And I see Carol and Miriam, Nicole. Hi, Tara. This is really amazing. A lot of old and new faces. And the negative is that I can't see in person, but the positive is that since I'm a stay-at-home mom right now, you don't even know whether I have macaroni and cheese from the waist down covered all over me and finger paint or not. So it works to my benefit right now. So I'll tell you why I chose this particular topic. I chose this topic, make sure you're unmuted, by the way. I chose this particular topic because I feel that right now, when we're all stuck in our homes, and you'll see by the end of this class, that there's a unique opportunity for all of us to harness. And I might break into tears a few times because I feel like sometimes I'm gonna tear my shaitel out from being so incredibly stressed from being in home all the time, being that I'm such a outgoing person. But you'll see by the end of this class that this might be one of those moments where you wonder, why has nobody ever taught me this before? Like, how could I have been Jewish my entire life? Hi, Fanny, by the way. Why has nobody ever taught me this before? And to be truthful, this is probably, I have this reaction multiple times a year. Every time I teach this, I think, wow, this is something that I need to spread to the world. So the topic is about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So although Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde has been around since 1886, it slowly, if you're not familiar with the story, it's about the split personality of a very prominent doctor named Dr. Jekyll. And he has this alter ego or this dark side to him named Mr. Hyde. And he takes this potion in order to be able to transform himself physically. And therefore he can commit any heinous acts he wants. It's a really dark story. And I remember reading it in high school. But one of the things that I found to be so fascinating is to see the literary analysts talk about how many of us have that Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde personality within us, that we're one way in front of certain people and a very different way in front of other people or even behind closed doors. That there's a dark side to all people. Every human being has that side that they don't want to show to other people. They're not really willing to be able to explore that dark side and find out where it comes from. So I'll give you an example. Samantha, I changed her name to protect the innocent. Samantha is a good friend of mine, and she told me the story after I gave this class to her. She said that she was dating this guy for a few months, and finally this guy invited her home to meet his mother, which is like, that's definitely a big time in your relationship. And she meets him, all goes well. She puts on her best behavior, the mom puts on her best behavior, and all is right with the world. It was a few weeks after she had met her very new boyfriend's mother that she was taking a Spirit trip, a Spirit airline flight to some type of hot destination with a few of her friends for spring break. And when she was checking into the counter, she'd been running late and they went flying, skipped the entire line of people waiting and saying, we're gonna miss our flight, we're gonna miss our flight. And when she went up to the counter, the woman's like, I'm really so sorry, but you're 1 minute late to be checking into your flight, so we can't let you on, the flight's been closed. And she said, you must be kidding me. 1 minute? How can you? I paid so much money for these tickets. Please just let us on this flight. This is our spring break. If we don't get on now, we won't be able to go. We've been looking forward to this. And she's like, I'm sorry, you're 1 minute late. So the way she described it was a way that I can't necessarily show to you, but she just blurted out a spew of profanity and just like, you bleep it. And she just went on and on. I can't believe this. And she totally lost it with this woman who works for Spirit Airlines. When she realized that this woman wasn't going to budge, she looked at her friend. She's like, forget it. And then another profane word. And then she just said, we're going to just go. And she turned around, and lo and behold, who does she see waiting to check into their flight online? Her boyfriend's mother. So she sees it, and she's like, her moment of humiliation of seeing that she's been exposed, that the dark side has been exposed. So this like woman who means so much to her in her life, that her relationship depends on this, she was humiliated. And she made direct eye contact with this woman. So she couldn't even pretend that she doesn't even see her. Since then, every time I lose it, I make sure to wear sunglasses. I don't have to make eye contact with anybody. But I'll tell you that this story resonated with me, because me as a mother, you know, like right now, you're not going to be let into my house because of coronavirus. But, you know, I wish one of you would come and just be a little bit of a witness, so I would be able to behave a little bit better. Because as a mother of 6 children, staying at home, trying to manage all of their schedules, ladies and gentlemen, I love teaching adults, but do not ask me to teach ABCs to some 5-year-old. And I am sometimes a little bit running short of patience. And if someone would see how I behave in my house when nobody else is around and when I'm really under a lot of pressure, I would be absolutely mortified. I'll give you another example, which is a really sobering example, which I won't give too many details to because it's uncomfortable to talk about. But a few years ago, there was a big scandal of a rabbi in the Washington, D.C. area. And he's apparently a very prominent rabbi who was very popular. Remember, rabbis are human beings. And just because someone calls themselves a rabbi doesn't necessarily mean, you know, there's rabbis of all different shapes and colors. And he was involved in a terrible scandal that was all over the news. Something about how in his private life, he was doing some inappropriate stuff in terms of videoing women. And that's all the information I'll give you over Zoom. It was a devastating thing to see. Now, if I was your friend, and let's say we both were congregants in his shul, if I was your friend and I said, why are you so judgmental of him? Why did they fire him over this scandal? He's so great at the pulpit. He relates to us so well. He's so kind. He's so sweet. You would look at me and say, you're out of your mind. Because we judge people based on what they do in private or based on who they are when they think and nobody is looking. We judge people based on the quote unquote Mr. Hyde personality they keep within us, because we recognize that that's the most authentic version of themselves when there are no witnesses. And you would never judge someone by who they are in public if you knew and you found out. And we know a plethora of examples in terms of scandals with current day politicians and how we find out, oh no, 25 years ago, they did some terrible thing, and we judge them by the thing that they did. I'll give you another example. Actually, that's a pretty bad example, but I like to be honest because you realize that I'm teaching myself as I'm teaching you. I'm on the same level as you. My son has an assignment every night where he has to call in his homework to his Rebbe. And he was calling in his homework, and of course he's being recorded. And I didn't know that he was being recorded. And I said something really embarrassing, really loud in the same room. And he turned to me and said, Mom, shh, I'm on the phone with my Rebbe. It's being recorded. Of course, I grabbed the phone and tried somehow to figure out a way that I could stop and rewind and re-record. But of course, in my haste, I hung up. And of course, the message was sent out and there's nothing I could do about it. I was so embarrassed about having someone peek into who I am in my private home. So the fact is that we all carry this tendency with us. I'm sure some of you are thinking in your mind of some time where you were exposed, your private self was exposed as well. And that tendency is almost like a human gene. It's genetically ingrained within us that we have this. You know, I remember seeing stories about people who did some terrible crimes in the Holocaust and how, you know, there were some incredibly dignified human beings prior to this opportunity that they could bring their Mr. Hyde out to the open and show people what they're made of. And the Torah actually says that there is a reason why this is in place. And the question we have to ask ourselves is, where does it come from? How do we heal this part of ourselves? How do we heal a fractured world? Through healing ourselves and becoming whole and complete. How do we become the most authentic version of ourselves? And what are the consequences of being a fragmented person? The Torah addresses this in a very strange mitzvah. In fact, Natalie, you're on and you've heard this class before, but I'm impressed that you came on anyway to listen to it. I think this might be the 3rd time that you've heard this class, but that's your fault for hanging around me too much. The Torah says that there's a mitzvah, and I guarantee you, if you went to Hebrew school, or even if you went to some every day, like high school. If you went to a Jewish school, this is the mitzvah that your teachers probably skimmed right over. And they didn't necessarily want to go into it. Number one, because they didn't understand the incredible significance. Or number two, because it was a little bit uncomfortable to talk about. Because we in America, and if you're signing in from anywhere else in America, you probably know enough Americans to know this, we get a little bit uncomfortable with these types of subjects. But what's so breathtakingly beautiful about the Torah is that it is the most revealing and exposed text, where it discusses some of the most mundane elements of human life, where it explores and it unravels and unwraps some of the most bizarre circumstances. And it does it in such a refreshingly open way that you realize that this is a text that was written for me right now in all aspects of my life, even the untouchable aspects. And this is what this mitzvah is. The mitzvah was given in the context of war, which we are going into. If you have any children listening right now, you probably want to not allow them to listen, because we're going to get into some gory details shortly. The Torah gives this mitzvah in the context of war, and I'm going to read it for you now. If I had a little bit more warning about this class than yesterday, I would have actually prepared a slideshow for you. But it says, "V'atei tiyeh lacha al Azinecha v'haya b'shavtecha chutz v'chafarta ba v'shavta v'chisisa es tzesecha," which basically means, and you shall keep a shovel, or if you're calling from England, a spade, in addition to all of your weapons with you, and it should be with you at all times. Now the question is, I didn't translate the rest. The question is why? So anytime I ask this question, people immediately raise their hands and they say, because I'm sure it's to bury the dead. But the pasuk actually says in black and white that if you find the need to have to go to the bathroom in the field while you're at war, to defecate, have a bowel movement, then you should have this spade with you or this shovel with you at all times, and you should cover up after yourself. You should dig a hole and cover after yourself. Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't been to war at any point in my life. I'm kind of squeamish when it comes to these things. And I would venture to hypothesize that very few people on this line have ever been to war. But you've watched enough films to know that when it comes to a soldier at war, this area, the body, only has a certain amount of space, and you only have a certain amount of energy to carry a very specific collection of things that you will need when you're on the battlefield. So what are some of those things? I can imagine, I'm not very familiar with ancient warfare material, paraphernalia, but I can imagine some type of sword, or a longer sword and a shorter sword. I'm sure they had some type of bow and arrow, and then also a shield. You guess, think of some of the things. Now, I'm sure they had some type of life-saving material, like first aid kits, food, water. Probably that's it. You have such a limited amount of space here. If the Torah is demanding of a soldier to carry with them one more thing, it could be a risk of their life. Why is this so necessary? You're at war. To cover up after your bathroom behavior, I think, is just something that is a little bit demanding. I can imagine, and this is just coming from, this is what we call Torah Adina, which is not very trustworthy, but I can imagine that before the Star of David became this incredibly recognizable symbol of what it meant to be a Jew in the public world, I can imagine that how did you differentiate between a Jewish soldier and a non-Jewish soldier at war? They probably made a reputation of themselves at some point. We're like these strange soldiers. They carry this thing like a shovel with them at all times, because everybody knew that wasn't necessary to be at war. But of course, if you look a little bit deeper, you'll realize a very important principle in the Torah, which is that every mitzvah has the technical mitzvah element to it, and it also has the value behind the mitzvah. And if one will only stop at the technical mitzvah, you are robbing yourselves of an opportunity to get to the meat and the potatoes of what it means to be a Jew. So we have to delve deeper into the value behind this mitzvah. And once we do, you'll consider this a foundational principle in your life, money back guaranteed. I'll give you an example of what I mean by the technical elements of mitzvah and the value behind it. So we know that Pesach's coming up, and Pesach is the time where we eat what food? We eat matzah, and we're not allowed to have any other things besides matzah, namely chametz. You're not allowed to have matzah that has risen too much, bread. So if I would ask you, based on your Hebrew school education, why do we have matzah? You'll say because the Jews left Egypt in a hurry and they didn't have time for the bread to rise. But if I told you that 1,000 years earlier, Abraham also ate matzah on Pesach, you'll say, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Pesach never happened yet. They didn't even leave Egypt. The story never took place. So how could Rashi say that that Abraham had matzah 1,000 years earlier? And Rashi's begging to call attention to you. Fanny, mute yourself.
Yeah, I am.
There you go. Now you're muted. The Torah is begging and pulling you in, almost like an iceberg moment, right? It's a moment where you see a little bit of iceberg and it's begging you to realize that there's a huge, monstrous idea lying just underneath the surface. It's saying that matzah is much deeper than just the concept of just leaving Egypt in a hurry. So therefore, if we look at this as an iceberg moment, it's calling our attention, but it's calling us to look deeper to the value. Then we'll go into the following concept. So what's the reason why the Torah, and I'll tell you if this is just about cleanliness or hygiene or even human dignity, which a lot of you might have guessed at this point, and why does the Torah choose the context of war to give us something that we can use in our everyday lives? Like just say, be dignified in all times. When you go to the bathroom, cover up. Why does the Torah specifically choose a soldier at war? And the Torah actually does this many, many times. There are a lot of commandments that are given during wartime that are like everyday messages. Namely, my bubby, may she rest in peace, my bubby, her name was Miriam, she would force us to finish all the food on our plate. God bless her, I take after her, so I can't even criticize her. Miriam, she was a Holocaust survivor, so I can definitely see where she was coming from, but there was something deeper to that. She used to use the term batashches, which is the term that we use when we don't want to waste any of Hashem's resources, namely food or water. So where do we learn this? This is something that we use on it every day. I mean, we're told that over 50% of the world, I think it's over a third of the world's resources go to waste. This is a crime in the public. Yet, what do? We don't care. And the Torah tells us we should care about everything that we use. Every cup of water, not to run the water when we're brushing our teeth. Turn it off when you brush your teeth and then turn it on when you need it. The Torah says be careful. And where's the mitzvah? The mitzvah is given at war, that when a platoon is going to invade into an enemy city beyond enemy borders, that before they go in, they should map out where all of the fruit trees are. And if they map out where the fruit trees are, they should be cautious not to destroy the fruit trees in the process of destroying a city. This is mind-blowing. We're talking about people who are trained to invade a city and to kill even women and children, if necessary, for self-defense. And the Torah is asking that at the point of you raging through a city for self-defense, you should be cautious and be careful not to destroy Hashem's world in the process, to realize that resources are there and they're to be valued, and it's there to sensitize you in terms of being a human being. So there are actually many other examples. I wish I had more time to go into more, but I want to get through. The Torah is telling us something about wartime, that they dump a ton of mitzvos on us, on a soldier at war, and it's telling us about who we are today. Let me give you an example. Remember when I was in high school, I saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, which was a movie that starred Tom Hanks and Matt Damon. It was applauded in Hollywood and around the world for being one of the first films to really show you what wartime was all about. It didn't soften the blow to the viewer whatsoever. It was gory, it was bloody, it was graphic, and all the good people didn't survive at the end. And I think what was so remarkable about the film, and you could go back and watch it if you'd like, and you don't have to trust me, there was one scene in the film, it was D-Day at Omaha Beach, and Tom Hanks was trying to climb through the waters. You see him like really trying to get from the boat to the beach, and all of a sudden they're attacked by the enemies. and by the Nazis. And there's this one moment where you see body parts being flown in all different directions. It is so horrific, especially when you know that you're getting a window into something that really happened in history. Steven Spielberg was the producer of the film, and he said how he did so much research to make sure that he was being as incredibly authentic as possible to that fateful day, and not just World War II history, but world history. That was a turning point in the war. And he said that there's this one point where Tom Hanks is in the water and he's screaming at his soldiers because he's some type of captain. And at that, he realizes that nobody can even hear him because there is so much bombing and shooting, and the people that he is trying to give orders to are all being blown up left and right. And there's this moment where the music goes like dramatic, and where you see him just pause like this. And he's looking around him. And he looks to the right, and he looks to the left, and he sees that his world is coming to an end. And you see this like look of hopelessness on himself, on his face. And you see that like all around him, there's like bomb to the right of him, bomb to the left, and bomb to the back. And there's this like moment where now, ladies and gentlemen, that is the one part of the film that is not factual. Because in reality, do you think that a soldier at war, like at Omaha Beach in 1944, do you think they had a moment to pause and reflect? You must be kidding yourself. It was survival of the fittest. You kill or be killed. You didn't have a moment to sit and ponder and look around yourself. There wasn't a moment for everything to go slow motion all around you. That it's for theatrical purposes. I can't get the word straight. It's just to make it, it's for Hollywood. Even the most authentic of films, does not allow you to truly understand what it's like for a soldier at war. I'll give you a story, and this is not even about a soldier, this is about an everyday person. My grandfather, some of you might have actually seen the story on Facebook because it was spread quite a few times. My grandfather, when he was in Auschwitz, miraculously went into 7 different camps. And when he was in Auschwitz, he miraculously met up with one of his siblings. He was one of 7. It was his brother named Yehoshua Zelig that was right above him in birth order. And his brother was very, very ill, and he didn't think he was going to be able to make it till the end of the war. And my grandfather, my Zaidi, made a commitment to himself. And how do I know the story? Because he told me the story about 100 times, especially at the end when he would forget what stories he would tell me. It was about 100 times a day. He would commit to himself that he was going to not survive this war unless he survived with his brother. And so every day, my grandfather was in very good shape, and he was on the team of people that they were building the train tracks right outside the gates of Auschwitz. If you've been to Auschwitz, you probably passed those train tracks. My Zaidi would leave the camp every day, and he would work in the snow, bangering in nails into the train tracks, and then he would be schlepped back inside. And he was given, the elite group was given a cigarette and a half a slice of bread every single day. So he would trade his cigarette with someone else to get an extra slice of bread. Why would someone trade their slice of bread for an extra cigarette? Well, if you would read anything like Viktor Frankl's, Man's Search for a Meaning, this is one of the things that he mentions, is that if someone gave up during war, if they didn't want to live any longer and they planned to, let's say, throw themselves against the barbed wire, so then what would they do? They would trade their extra slice of bread for an extra cigarette, because I'm not going to live another day anyways, I might as well have another cig. So he every day would try to find someone and trade it, and he would take that extra slice of bread, and he would risk his life and go to bring it to his brother, Yehoshua Zelig. And he mentioned several times he was caught. They would ask him to pull down his pants. They would whip his bottom. One of the soldiers actually asked him, "How old are you?" And he said he was 17 or 18, I believe. And he would give him 18 lashes. And the next day he would take his extra slice of bread and he would bring it to his brother again. At the end of the war, they heard that the Americans and Russians were gaining the lead in the war, and all of the soldiers, all of the Nazis brought all of the Jews onto the death march, the infamous death march. And my grandfather held his brother with his right arm, and he held him up at the back of the line, and every time his brother started to collapse, he would pick him up again, and he would drag him through the death march. The people who were not well were always in the back of the line, of course, and they were being yapped at by the barking dogs at their heels, and they would be hit at the back by the butt of the Nazi guns. And my grandfather's brother, Yoshua Zelig, finally got fed up, and he turned to my grandfather and said, I've had enough. I'm going to step out of the line and go more to the front because I can't handle being hit in the back like this. And my grandfather, and this is what he says, before I could tell him not to step out of the line, he did. And he was shot in the spot. He said, after all of those months, after all of that time, swearing and devoting his life's mission was to keep his brother alive. In what split second, it was gone. Now, how did my grandfather react? And in every movie, when a brother would lose a brother at war, you would see this scene where he would hold the brother in his arms, and the music would get strong. It would be slow motion, and of course, everything around him just kept moving. But he would hold his brother and mourn his brother, and you'd see the tears falling down his face. It's that moment where you've always recognized, you've seen these scenes over and over again. How did my grandfather react? He stepped over the body and kept marching. That's it. And no choice. So what happens to a human being at war? What's unique about a human being's character that one goes through a transformation against one's will? That sometimes the best of a person comes out at war and sometimes the worst of a person comes out at war. What happens? Well, if it's survival of the fittest, which is the rule of the animal kingdom, the most animalistic sides of a person come out. The sides, the parts of them they don't want to be so public about. In fact, the reason why many of the Holocaust survivors were so private about their stories, were so silent about their stories for years after the war. It took someone like Elie Wiesel to really become public and be proud of their story. And many times I've heard this from survivors personally, where they said they were so humiliated to have to admit what they had to do to survive. Hiding in the latrines covered in human dung, or even risking someone else's life in order to save their own. These are things that they would never do in their lives today. They're so embarrassed and humiliated that they cause someone else pain in order to survive, but they had no choice. The most animal sides come out when your life is at risk. The Torah chooses this context specifically in order to reveal something about us today. The Torah says that every human being has this side to them that exists. Sometimes it's much more apparent, like at wartime. And sometimes it's much more concealed. But it always exists. And the Torah gives this mitzvah specifically at wartime to show us that today, in our everyday lives, we have to recognize that there is a godliness within us, and to remind ourselves of the godliness even at our most vulnerable and susceptible times to committing these things. So the following words actually I heard from a very special rabbi that lives in Jerusalem. His name is Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz. He is my personal rabbi. I hold him on speed dial, but unfortunately he's too busy to even speak to me on a weekly basis. But he's someone I turn to for when I need some big wisdom in my life. And if you don't have a rabbi, and I'm sure if you're on here, you've got one in your back pocket, keep them in your back pocket because you need them. Yitzchak Berkowitz taught us this. And I was sitting in a little room in a place called Sanhedrin Merchavet. If you've ever visited a seminary in Jerusalem like Neve, it's not far from there, just like maybe a 10 or 15 minute ride. And a small little classroom, a group of educators such as myself were learning this concept with Rav Yitzchak Berkowitz. And guess where my mind went? It went to immediately, and I bet you as I'm speaking, every single one of you who are on the line will also immediately, your mind will go to a place in your life where you also are most vulnerable and susceptible. So when I was single, before I met my husband and had a bunch of kids, I lived in Manhattan. I lived in New York City. I worked in the floral district near 28th Street for a very well-known tablecloth company we did some I was very, very, very low down on the totem pole in terms of the employees there. I was just getting started and I was really young, but I got to peek into some really cool jobs that we did. We did the set for Pleasantville, if you remember that movie, or was it the Stepford Wives? It was the set for the Stepford Wives. We did all their sets, and we also did some celebrity weddings. We did, it was pretty cool. So every day I put on, a nice suit jacket, I had to wear heels, and I had to put on a great face. Unbeknownst to my coworkers, I led a very different life when they didn't see me. Why? Because I was young, and it was the first time I had ever had my own apartment. It was the first time that I lived alone. I had gone from my home to studying in Israel for a year and having roommates. And then in college, I was just always living with someone else. And now I had finally made it. I had my own apartment in New York City and my own car. And I just felt like I was on top of the world. I'd made it in life. But a different side of me had come out. When you live alone and there's nobody there to witness your behavior, sometimes you do things that you'd be really humiliated if someone would watch. I'll give an example that's quite mild, because of course the things that I'm really humiliated about, I would never mention on Zoom to the public. So this is just a mild example. Thank you, Fanny, for smiling. When I came home, I would kick my heels off. I would take my suit jacket off. I immediately turn on the TV. Of course, I didn't have time or honestly energy to cook for myself. Even till today, I can't stand cooking. I would take my big, gigantic pizza box, yes, an entire pie pizza. And I had a large king-size bed in my bedroom. So I would stick the pizza box in my bed with me, and I would start watching TV. And then I'd continue to watch TV. And then sometimes I'd watch just garbage till like 2 in the morning because there's like nobody around to even know what I was watching. And you know what else happened? I'd fall asleep sometimes, even when I didn't put the pizza back in the refrigerator. And how do you think I felt when I woke up? Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. If I had a roommate, would I behave that way? Absolutely not. And I'll tell you a big turning point. When I was living alone, Hanukkah time came around. And I'll never forget this for the rest of my life. I came home really late, like 10 o'clock. I had a really late work day. And I realized it's the first night of Hanukkah and I had made no plans. You're supposed to get together with family. You're supposed to get together with friends. You light candles together. You sing. You get fat. It's wonderful. Except I had nobody. And I was too embarrassed to quickly text friends or some family to say, can I come over last minute? Because everybody had lit their candles already. It was 10 o'clock at night. But I was a good Jew and I loved Hanukkah. And the only thing I didn't have like a Hanukkah or anything. I only had my Shabbat candles. So I took 2 tea lights out. I put it on my windowsill, even though it was like the 10th floor in the building. Put it on my windowsill. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm just going to light by myself. And you know what? I felt really silly. I lit by myself. I said the blessings. And then there's that song afterwards, Ma'os Sor Yeshuasi. And I'm like, well, I guess I'll just say it because I'm not going to sing it. But then I thought, you know what? This is ridiculous. I've sung this every day of my life. Of course I'm going to sing it now. And I started to sing at first really, really low. Then my voice got a little bit louder because I was like, oh, I love this song. And then my voice got even louder. And then I found myself, and I kid you not, I found myself singing the top of my lungs with tears streaming down my face. You know why? Because who was my family and who was my friend at that moment? God himself. That's all I had. This was the first time in my life, I think I really tasted what it means to be able to develop a very intimate, close relationship with God. To do a mitzvah where there's nobody else around to see. To do the right thing when you cannot get credit. Now, if this was today, I'm going back like 15 odd years ago. If this was today, what would I have done? I would have taken a selfie of myself and plastered all over Facebook. Well, there goes that. But then, I don't think there was Facebook. And if there was, I wasn't on it. It was just me. Me and God. It's really a remarkable place to be, to develop that intimate relationship, to infuse holiness, to make the right choices, to be dignified in your most private realm of what we call your bathroom behavior when nobody else is around. To be able to behave with dignity there reveals a whole different side of yourself. It's where you can really taste the most authentic godliness within you. It's your true identity. I'll tell you something remarkable. I've discovered that there are, if let's say there's me, you are at your core, and there are 3 circles. Every person has what we call 3 circles that exist within them. There is their innermost circle, like with a part of yourself where nobody is around, like your inner dimension. I can show you in my notes. You see the 3 circles there? That would be when I would have shown you a slide if I had time to prepare it. Your innermost circle. Then outside of that circle, you have what you call your forgiving circle. I should tell you who your forgiving circle is. That's the people who you don't mind showing some of your innermost circle to. Like the people who you wouldn't mind yelling at if you get angry at them. Someone like your mom, your dad, maybe a sibling, maybe a coworker. And if you're married, definitely your spouse. That's the people who you show some of the worst sides to you just because you know they'll be forgiving and they'll never leave you. Then you have your outermost circle, and that's the people who you kind of go about your day, daily life. It might be your coworkers, it might be some of your friends, it might be your classmates, it might be your teachers, and it might be some of the people that you work with, in your office. That outer circle is not that forgiving, and therefore you show the best side of yourself. So those three dimensions are really important to view or envision within yourself. Those three dimensions almost mirror the three dimensions of the temple. We learned about the Mishkan actually in the past few parshas, but if you learn about the Beis HaMikdash and how it had the innermost dimension, which was the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, then you move outwards. And then you have another dimension, which is the Kodesh, the Holy. Then you have one more dimension, which is the Chatzah. That's the courtyard. That's like everybody was kind of hanging out there waiting to be able to do their sacrifices and to serve Hashem. So those three dimensions, if you look at those, you'll kind of understand your three dimensions. The Kodesh, HaKodashim, is the one I really want to focus on because that's the dimension that nobody was allowed into. That was the dimension that was total Shekhinah, was just Hashem's presence. And only one person was allowed to enter into the Kodesh HaKodashim on behalf of the Jewish people, and that was the High Holy Priest, the Kohen Gadol, on one day of the year. It was so intimate. What was inside there? Inside there was the Aron with two kruvim. Where does the word kruvim come from? You can actually Google it. The word cherub, right? The cherub actually originally is sourced with the word kruvim, which are angel-like figures. And they were perched on top of, they were made of gold, and they were perched on top of the Aron, which held the Torah. And what's so remarkable is that one of them was male and one of them was female. They had one female face and one male face. And every time the Jewish people had a good relationship with God, they faced each other. And every time they kind of broke away from what they were supposed to be doing, they faced apart. Almost like the male-female dynamic, that intimacy, that connection, that aloneness where nobody else was allowed to go. Almost that was like a microcosm of our relationship with God. In fact, this is something that is brought up many, many times. If you look up Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs is like this incredibly, very detailed, almost like makes you feel uncomfortable. If you look at the translations, it's a poem or a piece that was written in order to also show that our relationship with God is like a parable. I mean, that the relationship between men and women is a parable or a microcosm to show a relationship with God, like how you can actually taste a beautiful relationship, one of the highest levels. In fact, our rabbis say that the highest level that you can relate to God, more than relating to him as a father or a king or a judge, more than relating to him as in terms of those relationships, to relate to him as a lover is the highest level. When I learned that in high school, I always thought that was a little perplexing. Like to relate to God as a lover is a little bit, it makes you feel uncomfortable and I have no idea what they're talking about. Until you realize that the unique dimension of a relationship between lovers is that aloneness, that vulnerability, that nakedness, that openness, that like, I'm totally transparent, I can't hide anything from you type of dimension. When one brings God into their most private realms, one can taste the highest level of godliness within themselves. Try it. It's like me teaching this class is the equivalent of me trying to teach you how to ride a bike. I can't. You have to get on the bike. Teach yourself. It's something you have to experience to really feel the sensation. I can only give you the tools, but I can say that when you do a mitzvah alone, when you say a bracha and there's nobody around to say the word amen, when you make the right choices and there's nobody else around to experience, when you do a holiday or a Shabbat and you can't go to your local organization to enjoy it with your friends. How many of you are experiencing that now? When you can't visit your family for Shabbat, when you can't go to your rabbi for Shabbat, and Pesach's coming up, and one of your biggest fears might be, I have to do a Seder alone? Ladies and gentlemen, This is an amazing opportunity for all of us to be able to invite God into the most intimate spaces of our lives, to taste the highest level of relationship, which is an intimate relationship when there's nobody else around to make me feel good about this holiday, except me and God. I opened up with Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I said that we all have different dimensions to our personality. How do we become complete? How do we become a whole personality? And ladies, I will say that this has such, ladies and gentlemen, this has such a huge impact on you in terms of your future. You know what I would say is one of the most important, I would say one of the most key factors in having a successful marriage one day and having kids who love you and respect you. Respect is not something that you can demand of a child. Respect must be earned. How does one earn respect from a spouse and a child? By being a godly person when nobody else is around. How many times have I snuck something when I thought my kid wasn't looking and they noticed? How many times have I yelled when I thought nobody was around but my kids were around? They see that dual personality in its clearest form. You are totally transparent to your loved ones. There's the secret, and I wish I had more time to even go into a very special Gemara that talks about a woman named Kimchis that says that she never ever compromised on her dignity, even within the most private realms, even when only the 4 posts of her bedroom saw her, she never compromised her dignity. And the Torah says that's a promise to have good kids. Promise. So it's not about the parenting courses, even though I do always put a plug in for my parenting courses. It's not about parenting courses because ultimately you could be the best, most skilled parent, but if they see a dual personality within you, they'll lose respect from you. And guess what they'll also do? Monkey see, monkey do. They'll also develop to be that person. Bringing God into your innermost spaces is the most revealing experience. And today we are all in what in Israel are calling bidud, which is quarantine. So all my little nieces and nephews in Harnof, Jerusalem are like, I'm in bidud, right? Which really means my mom is going crazy because we're stuck with her all day long. Quarantine is like nothing is by chance, ladies and gentlemen, nothing. The word bidud is also from this, is the same word as hitbodedut. Hitbodedut is like an internal introspection. It's like almost, I can't even call the word meditation because it's robbing of its beautiful form in Hebrew. It's like the intimate connection with God. Hasidim, actually, when they do hitbodedut, they go out to the forest and they talk to God in their forest because they don't want anybody else around. If you ever saw the film, I forgot the name of the film, but it's a film, whatever. But you'll see how you can see Hasidim going around, they're just screaming out to God in the middle of a forest. Such a beautiful quality to develop within oneself is to be in quarantine with God. Now, over the past many decades, we as Jews, and I'll end with this, we as Jews most definitely haven't been able to harness this power. You know why? Because we have been able to live freely as Jews. We're not in communist Russia. We're not in Spain. We're living in America. We do these massive Jewish parties out in the open with no fear for our lives. We have synagogues that are flourishing, and we make these huge kiddushim, and we have classes, and we live so freely as Jews, and therefore we've almost kind of used our community as a crutch in terms of connecting with God. And now God's like, whoa, wait. And listen, this is only my hypothesis. I can't pretend to know what's going on, but this is only my own personal take on this. God's like, wait a minute, it went way too far. You have birthright and you have Olami and all these different, and everybody's kind of just like pulling you out from my intimate space, my relationship, my Kodesh Kodashim, my Holy of Holies with you. I want you to taste what it means to be able to really be in that connection. And this is our opportunity. So I'll end with the following story, which is really close to my heart. I lost my mother a few years ago to cancer, and it was a really fast-growing cancer.